Alright guys, so tonight we're going to do a video on winter maintenance on a motorcycle. All you guys that's getting ready to go into the winter season, not going to be riding much, be a good time to grease your bearings, go through the steering stem, swing arm, linkages, grease that. We're going to go through that and what to check on a bike, even a new bike. It never hurts to go through and grease the bearings. I can tell you, when I got this one, took it apart, there was very little grease on the steering stem bearings or the linkage bearings. So it's a good idea to go through, grease them, check them. You can also go over a new bike if you get it and make sure the shop tightened all the bolts that they had to put on. They have to put the handlebars, the wheels on them. So just some things to check when you get a new bike, or things to do through the winter when you're not riding much and you want to do some maintenance on your bike to keep them running, lasting longer. So we'll go ahead and we'll start off on this one. We'll start with the steering stem, greasing the steering stem bearings. So we'll have to pull the forks and the wheel off. So we'll start with that. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get started on the front here. Remove the crossbar pad. That'll be the easiest thing we do on this. We'll go ahead and take the front number plate off. Next, we'll take the handlebars off. Bolts up here on top that holds these clamps on for the handlebars. Back to the side. Next, we'll move on down and take the front tire off, or front wheel. Alright, we'll go ahead and take the front wheel off now. Not too bad to do on these either. .22mm nut. That off. There's 2 pinch bolts on each side on your forks that hold the axle. just slide the axle out now. I like to remove the spacers and put them back on the axle. The nut on there so you don't lose it. Alright, now that we got the tire off, we'll go ahead and take the brake caliper off. Two bolts here. I like to take something and tie them back. So I got a bungee cord here. We'll hook it up with a bungee cord to keep it from putting pressure on the brake hose. We'll come on up here and we'll take the clamp off that's holding the brake hose to the fork guard. Now that we've got that, we're ready to take the forks off. Loosen these bolts on each. Two on the lower clamp, two on the upper clamp. Twist the fork a little bit and ease it down. Set these to the side. We'll go ahead and remove the fender just to get it out of the way. Alright. 4 bolts down here under the fender. Alright, now that we've got that, we'll go ahead and remove our steering stem nut. Get the upper triple clamp out of the way. Got that out of the way. Now we'll get this right here. They're not too tight. Go ahead and throw that nut off of it. Like I said, when I got this back, I did grease them, so these should have plenty of grease on them still, but we'll do this and add a little more if they need it. There we go. Now I got the triple clamp off. You want to make sure everything's clean in here. Wipe it out, clean it up good. All the way through the steering stem. You got your bearing race here. You want to make sure it's good and clean. Got another one on the bottom, down under here. Your lower race. Make sure that's good and clean. Make sure your upper bearing's good and clean and grease it up good. Lower bearing, same way. Make sure it's good and clean. Grease it up good. Alright, got it all cleaned up and greased up. Pack the bearings in, put a good coat of grease around them. Slide the bearing, the steering stem back up to the hole. I've now got the upper bearing sitting in it. We'll put the nut back on. This nut here does have a torque spec. I'm thinking around 44 inch-pounds. Check your service manual and see what yours calls for, or your owner's manual. You notice when we took this one off, it was finger tight. That's the way it was when I bought it, it was finger tight. So that was kind of the way I put it back on last time. I'm just going to barely put a little bit on it right here. Maybe that was a little too much. Take it back off. You want your steering clamp to move easy, not got a lot of resistance on it. No slack up and down or in and out, forward, backward. Get that big good and snug. After we do that, we'll flip the handlebars back over to the front. And then we can go ahead and stick the upper triple clamp back on. Slide it on there and put the nut back on it. We will torque this one when we go back, but right now we don't want to tighten this one until we get the forks in, because if you tighten it like that, your forks ain't going to line up. So you definitely want to make sure you get the forks lined up. Get the forks in before you tighten the upper steering stem nut. And that's what we'll do next. We'll go ahead and slide the forks in. Alright, now that we got the triple clamps back on, we can fold the handlebars back across. Next, we're ready to put the forks back on. Not a bad idea to take the fork guard off of it. Check the fork tube, make sure there's no dings in it, dents. Make sure it's good and clean. Clean out from around inside the seals. But, this one's good. We'll go ahead and put it back on. Wipe off the second tube. Second side will be a little easier because it's lined up a little better. put your forks in, there's a couple things you want to make sure of. You want to make sure you got the same fork height from the triple clamp to the top of the fork on both sides. This one, I know you can't see it in the video, but there is a ring that'll help you judge or guide, show you where it needs to go. You can also adjust these. It'll change the handling characteristics of the bike, the way it turns. Also, on top of the fork, you've got your clicker adjuster, and you've got your bleeder. On this one, the way the handlebars are set up, I put the bleeder at the bottom. It's a little easier to get to. If you put it at the top, the handlebars are in the way. It's hard to bleed the air off the forks. So this bike does have adjustable handlebar mounts, so it depends on where you put your handlebars. If your handlebars is back here in this rear hole, you'd want to have your bleed screw at the front. So it just depends on where your handlebars are set up and how you want it to be. Alright, once we get the forks on, get the fork height set, get the air bleed valve where we want it. We can go ahead and tighten the lower clamp bolts. These are going to tighten on this bike to 17 foot-pounds. And you want to go back and forth evenly on. Don't just torque it to one, don't turn it to one clicks and then go to the other one. Go back and forth some. Then after they torque, go over them a couple times back and forth so neither one of them moves before it clicks. We can go to the other side. Now that we've got that, we can torque the big nut on top. Don't want to tighten these till you torque that, because that could allow a false torque because it's not letting this seat down like it needs to. Alright. This one right here, this big nut on top here, it's going to torque to 74 foot-pounds. Now that we've got that, we can go ahead and torque the upper triple clamp bolts down. Go down to 17. Do these the same way, go back and forth. Alright, now we can go ahead and put the handlebars back on. these, just go back and forth on them as well. Get them forward. Alright, next we'll go ahead and put our front brake hose back in the holder, put the caliper back on, get it out of the way so we can get the fender and the tire back on. Go ahead and torque our front brake caliper bolts. 18 foot-pounds on this one, as well as that's what the handlebars was. Put the fender back on now. Now we'll be ready to put the tire on. Alright, I like to make sure we get the axle spacers good and clean before we put them back in the wheel. Bring them up, stick them back in the wheel. We'll slide the wheel back in here. Brake pads lined up. Also like to make sure your axle is good and clean. Put a little grease on it. once you get the nut on there, axle all the way in, you can go ahead and tighten down this right hand fork. The axle pinch bolts down here on the fork. Go ahead and tighten them. This will hold your axle still while you torque it, or tighten it if you don't torque it. Go ahead and torque this. It torques to 17 foot-pounds. And these torque specs I've been given are specific to the bike, so if you've got a different year, maker, model, you need to look up your torque specs for your bike. Don't go off what I'm saying, because it might not be right. We got that fork and nut pinch bolts tight. We'll go ahead and tighten torque the front axle. It's going to be 59 foot-pounds on this one. Now we can go ahead and torque the left side fork axle pinch bolts. Alright, once you do that, spin the tire, pump the brakes. Make sure they're working good. And we're ready to put the front number plate and the crossbar pad back on, and this job will be done. Front number plate. This is an aftermarket front number plate, not the factory, so it is a little different than what you may see on your bike. Factory ones does not take the zip ties. Factory one's made a little different right here too, with your brake hose. It's got a different setup for the clamp. crossbar pad. And that's got it finished up.